Hello and welcome to this edition of WoW with AI, which is where we get in some of the most thoughtful business leaders who talk about how does the ways of working changing in particular industry or particular segment with AI at the core of it. And today, I'm very fortunate to have one of my very good friends, Jay Scanlan. Apart from being my very good friend, he's been an ex-colleague, but before that, he's been a partner in McKinsey, looking at enterprise business services in a very broad way and across a set of different industries. He was one of the executive leaders at Genpact, where we intersected. He's been at Accenture, leading their private equity business, and now he's helping a series of private equity firms think and rethink actually what does it mean to do with AI in the enterprise business services space. So Jay, welcome, and it's always lovely to chat with you.
Yeah, no, great to see you, Amaresh. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. So Jay, what's the state of the union? I mean, I know you've done enterprise business services and all forms, like professional services, legal, like telecom, all kinds of things, B2B, B2C. Where are we now, especially with everything that's going on in AI and very people intensive businesses that you take a look at?
Yeah, no, it's a great question because I think we're in very, very early days,
Hmm.
right? Like people are getting very excited about a world in which they can sort of see the future, either very positively or very negatively or with great uncertainty. The reality is we are just starting this revolution, and the leaders of this revolution are about 6 to 9 months ahead of everybody else. But we're we're literally only you know probably in the first over, if we were back in my UK days, or the top of the first inning
Yeah.
when it comes to the impact of these general purpose technologies on businesses, particularly the kinds of businesses I spend most of my life with. And so I think the breathless kind of hype cycle around, it's a boom, it's a bust, it's going to be a transformational thing, it doesn't actually have very much impact at all. I think it's largely too early to tell. But I think that when we think about general purpose technology, it takes a lot longer than people think, and the impact comes a lot faster than people can imagine. And so I think we're in a very, very exciting time, but we're very, very early days, and we shouldn't fool ourselves otherwise.
But what are the early shoots that you see, or like where do you see it going? Just kind of your, or at least perspective, and then we can kind of deep dive into a few things of that.
Yeah, this is when you say something that somebody pulls out 5 years from now and goes, "See
Exactly.
how terribly wrong you were." But listen, I think that this is going to be more transformational, at least in the business models I spend time with. This is going to be more transformational, certainly than things like RPA were. Maybe as transformational as the internet. Some very esteemed observers have called it, the next internet. Um, but on a multi-generational basis, I think it could be as important as electricity or the plowshare.
Hmm.
As we build new native AI businesses that really augment, automate, and reimagine work, we're going to end up in a world where transaction costs are fractions of what they are today. We're going to live in a world where the doing of the cognitively complex tasks that we used to do
Yeah.
um, is going to be a lot less important, and things like building new capabilities and new wiring and new business propositions are going to become much, much more important. And so, in the short run, this is a lot more important than RPA was. In the medium run, by that I mean the next 5 to 10 years, it's going to be as impactful as the first wave of digital and internet and all that great stuff. But on a multi-generational basis, it could be a lot more important than that.
I love the bookends and the time frame. It kind of it frames it in a very interesting way. So that's actually very useful. So let's talk about kind of this whole notion around, like, with maybe if you can share with examples, right? I mean, uh, whether you think of it as our RPA plus or whether you think of it as an internet, uh, and you have all these business services firms dealing with this.
Yeah.
the fundamental thing is, regardless of where you kind of go, there is no regret in the sense like the core business model, which is based on some sort of a pyramid, based on a billable hour, uh, that is will be under threat because the economics and where the billable hour falls, where the margins are, I mean, that fundamentally changes, even if it's RPA plus, right?
Yeah.
So what's happening there, and what do you see structurally, or it's too early for you seeing anything structural?
No. I mean, I'm very privileged to be independent now in a time when um, the power of independence and not being tied to large organizational IT policies and everything else allows me to experiment a lot more. So let me talk just a little bit about the impact, and let me make it really personal. Um, these new capabilities can augment, automate, eliminate, reimagine, reorchestrate, and then create new work, right?
Right,
Like new tasks. Um, and so I say this to my clientele. I say, look, guys, I don't need a team anymore.
right.
I mean, as I do advisory led work,
Hmm.
things that used to require a week and, you know, a very bright, younger tenured colleague slaving through, internet research and primary interviews and pivot tables and everything else. A huge amount of that work, if you use the right tools and the right ways of working, now can be done as an individual senior practitioner with 80%, 90% less effort than before. And one of the challenges is that the more senior you are, the better you are at actually being able to do that.
Right.
And so from an augmentation and automation perspective of these, complex tasks of providing strategic advice, doing organizational transformation, driving post-merger integration, whatever it is,
Yes.
a huge number of those augmentation and automation tasks have become really, really, really easy. Now, you're pushing a little bit further if we think about like workflow. And the problem is a lot of the professional information services, business services, technology services companies I spend time with and you spend time with, the problem is that they haven't defined their workflow.
Mm.
And so, when we had RPA, rapidly pushing automatically, that was really hard for us because as people who want to build great businesses, the process foundations just didn't exist.
Right.
The fascinating bit on this is that you can now have the tools help you define the workflow, help you reorchestrate the workflow if you get as far as actually implementing agentics, and then delivering output. And so, for example, if you're in a large enterprise sales organization, what used to take grabbing data from 6 different systems and putting together, an RFP response document, as you and I both know, whether it be in technology or telecom or info services or whatever, all of those process steps that were never documented were all tribal knowledge, all required you to be apprenticed. All of that stuff can now be combined
Right.
by the tooling and largely either augmented, automated, or eliminated by that tooling, so that the people can actually spend more time thinking about the important stuff, which is what's our value prop to our customer, what's the client going to receive from this, what's our pricing approach be, and all the content judgment questions
Right.
will get more and more attention and focus, and the doing of the wiring of all this information together will become less and less important. And so if we think about, any enterprise service sales model, whether it be telecom or info services, it's just become a heck of a lot easier to do any of those things.
Absolutely. And we are working on a few of them together, and where we see some of that. But let me just double click on your personal experience a little bit, and because that will tell us a lot more. Give us a couple of examples of like kind of the tools you're using and what are you kind of doing with it, that and what would have earlier happened versus now. Just like a little
Sure.
bit before, after, and contrast it.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about doing, a target addressable market
Okay.
question for our client, that's trying to decide which parts of its business to reinvest in, which parts maybe to not invest in, or potentially even divest, right? It used to be to put a target addressable market study together, you would need to define the market. You then need to go buy some off the shelf market reports, which frankly the methodology underpinning them wasn't very strong.
Right.
You would then try to cobble together a set of expert interviews from a GLG or an AlphaSense or somebody like that to understand what client buyer personas might want to buy from you, and what the key attributes are of all the leading players and the competitors and everything else. That could take a week of effort, right? To do all those things. Now, what you can do is, number one, you sit on a piece of paper,
Yeah.
break down all of the key questions that you need to answer against that.
Right.
Write really long prompts
Yeah.
that talk about, the task, the persona, the steps of the problem solving you want it to do, and everything else. And you write down those prompts. And what I do is I run it through 3 or 4 models
Mm.
simultaneously, right? And, how big is the market? What do client buyers want? What are our major competitors? Where are the organizational cultural elements of each of those companies? And the deep search capabilities of the models go out and do query fan out and all these other things to go grab all of those
Right.
insights. And they create me long, extensive reports because I asked for long, extensive reports. And then what I do is I take those 4 outputs and then I swap those outputs to other models. And I
Interesting.
say, hey, what's really good? What's missing? What's wrong? What do you disagree with? Where is there no consensus? And then I have those 4 outputs quality controlled by another model to get me 4 more outputs.
Right.
And then I take those 8 outputs and then I put them into a final synthesis model and I say, give me your best view on the target addressable market for whatever it is, manual market research, high-end market research
Right.
services or whatever it is.
Right.
And that 9th model, I say, give me the very best view on what the target addressable market is.
Yeah.
Give me the places where there's great certainty. Give me the places where there's still uncertainty. Give me the key buyer, characteristics, et cetera, et cetera. And by the way, tell me and flag where there's still areas of disagreement or uncertainty or open questions for potential disruption or innovation or whatever. And then I get an amazing market report. And much of the, concern or fear over things like, hallucination, making up sources,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff gets more and more minimized the more different models you put things through, because you make the models do quality control. And then you, as a senior partner, are able to go through and work and look at all the output and say, yeah, like I get that. I'm going to spot check that. That doesn't make sense. And then what would have taken me days of work with team of 2, 3, 4 colleagues now is something that I can kind of orchestrate. I have all the models running on
Right.
tabs in parallel and in the background, always in a SOC 2 enterprise compliant container, by the way, so that's really important. um and uh and then I have a really, really good knowledge basis on which to apply both expertise and judgment for the client going forward, right? And so, like, and the problem is most of our larger organizations, they might have one model. They
Yeah.
may want one tool.
Yeah.
Maybe they've got an internal knowledge graph, and then maybe they cheat and use like consumer
Right.
grade containers with another model or two. But the fundamental arming yourself
Mm.
with those capabilities. Now, the next step is like, how do you produce output? Because
Yes.
like that's a great,
Oh,
25, 30-page report, but like your client doesn't want to read that. And
right.
the mechanism of delivery remains things like PowerPoint or some presentation software. And so then you take that amazing report and then you put it into, again, an enterprise grade SOC 2 AI tool, which converts all of that great insight into a report. And the prompt you give that tool is like, these are the sections I want. These, this is roughly the number of pages. These are the big themes to be explored and the frameworks to structure each of those sections.
Right.
You put that into a tool, it pops you out a nice PowerPoint. That PowerPoint, sometimes a section isn't great. So you like cut out that section, like just that part of your market analysis, and you have it redo just that section for you.
Right.
And then once you've done all that, you do a final quality control. I always find myself investing a few hours to like make it really mine.
Right.
And then I run that final output back through the models and I say, what do you think?
Interesting. And
And so like all of the like if you use these tools as thought partners, as production partners, as research partners, and you really treat them that way, they're incredibly impactful.
so why not? What's really fascinating is the kind of like the first round of models were like your associates, right, or senior associates. Your second round of model was essentially was your engagement manager, and your ninth model that you just said was basically your AP or a director. That's basically what the way you described it. I mean, that's how the process runs. The second piece before we get on the lesson, listen, I mean, you have adapted to a completely new way of working here, uh, and everything in AI we talk about change management, uh, because last maybe 25 years that's not how you worked. Last 1 year you have been working like this. I mean, and that's like a big deal around it. So this whole AI augmented advisory, everything that you're talking about, what do you miss? Like, what has been hard, I personally, to go over the hump and do it? I mean, we'll get to the lessons, but I want to understand the reverse of it. Is what makes it uncomfortable, and because that will be the challenge for everyone else.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so let me start with what's uncomfortable and let me tell you how getting started is difficult, right?
Okay.
So the uncomfortable bit is some nights on a Sunday night you have to open up to Excel and do a pivot table yourself,
Yeah.
right? Or you have to have the one of the more numerically capable models build you a model that you then have to quality control and everything else. So the first is um, there is still some manual effort there that I'm doing where I would love to turn around to a great like Davidson graduate or whatever and say, hey, listen, could you just do the pivot table and give me the 2x2 on growth versus margin or whatever it is, right? So there is a little bit of personal pain on like I'm back to my business analyst days 27 years ago. So that's the first thing. The second thing that's a bit painful um is proprietary knowledge, right? So I would love to have the knowledge graph and knowledge corpus that a large firm does, and or market research firms or whatever, right? And so,
Mm,
I will bring in third party data, paid for third party data as appropriate,
right.
but to have all of those on tap, you don't have to go through the transactional costs of calling up PitchBook or Preqin or whomever else
Right.
and buying a data run on behalf of your organization, your client. That would be nice, right? So just some of the transactional friction there. On a more human level, um, you do miss the really naive question that a young tenured analyst or associate would give you, which is sometimes the unlock of why does the industry do that? Right?
Yeah,
Like,
right. Yeah.
and whilst I can ask the models to do those things, and they're very good on the evolutionary kinds of ideas,
Yeah.
anything near adjacent, all that kind of stuff. Models beat humans all the time because they just have more insight to draw from than you do.
Right.
Um, on the revolutionary ideas, like let's paint the world, let's paint the town red rather than black or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Those often come from the most exciting places in your team, generally the most junior tenured, because they have not been inured
Right.
in the underlying structures, assumptions, beliefs about how industries work and everything else. And whilst
Right.
I think some of my friends would say I'm slightly iconoclastic on many of those things, having another younger tenured thought partner to really push the thinking forward on that
Right.
would be great. And I find those in my client organizations, right? But certainly occasionally I'd like, I could just hire a person or two, but then of course, as you well know, you end up leading a firm yourself, right? And that's not my current near term objective is to
Absolutely.
create a new firm from scratch. But let's see.
So what were the lessons learned? I mean, I stopped you, so yeah.
No, some lessons learned, because I've been sort of diagnosing how um some advisory and info services and other businesses are using their current internal capabilities.
Right.
And so I've had the honor and fortune of being able to go through more junior tenured client colleague work, looking at their prompts, looking at how they're interacting with the tool, all that kind of stuff. I've looked at mid tenured people's work, and I've looked at, much more senior tenured people's work. Um, I think the most fascinating thing, there are two fascinating lessons from looking at junior tenured colleagues' work. One is they use this as a production to often use it as a production tool rather than as a problem solving thought partner.
I see.
Number one.
Mm.
And so they will ask the tool to go rewrite this or do that or whatever,
Right.
rather than asking reflective questions about, what do you think the right answer is? What are the elements of this problem that I haven't considered, or do I have the right take on this, or stuff like that. So the first is using it like a tool rather than a thought partner. And the other thing that more junior tenured colleagues can sometimes do um is they feel like they have to abide by some sort of rule, right? Like there's some rules, like, oh, I could never do that with the model,
Uh-huh.
be, either because of their academic background, and something we can touch on together, I think, today, this morning, or it's an over concern that somehow somebody's going to judge what they're doing to be wrong. And I'm not going to speculate if that's an intergenerational thing or if that's just a career level thing or whatever. But those are the two big lessons learned. Whereas senior people, once you give them these tools in a way that's validated and robust, they will run with it, right? That they will play and innovate till the cows come home, because they will just ask the tool everything that they want to know, and they therefore won't get stuck on,
Right.
am I doing the right thing or wrong thing with this? Because they're just like, oh, this is like when we got graphing calculators in high school, 35 years ago, right? It's like, oh, I've got a new graphing calculator. Let's see what it can do. That's number one. And number two, their prompt structures are much, much, much more interesting. And much more multi-shot, right? And so, where a junior tenured colleague might use the tool 2 or 3 times in a row, you'll see senior colleague conversations that are 5, 10, 15 prompts, long, detailed, describe what success looks like and all that stuff. And so those are some of the lessons learned. And I think it has some important implications on talent and on learning and development in these types of businesses and everything else. But
Let,
it's a fascinating set of observations.
let's go there briefly, which is, I mean, we both are fairly involved in academia too. And these enterprise business services as a sector probably is one of the largest white collar kind of recruiters in from colleges, right? And you just talked about junior talent, difference between junior talent. You need the junior talent, but they do certain things right, certain things not right. How would you advise someone, or what is the talent profile going to should look like if you want to play in this space, and what you should probably, what is overvalued right now, you should probably avoid. What's your take? And I know it'll be a speculative answer, no one knows, but
I actually have a very strong point of view,
okay,
which is particularly a lot of the junior tenured folks that get recruited come from the social sciences, professional training, or
right,
the humanities, right? Um, and we have been judged for the last 250 years on the quality of output we deliver.
correct.
Our academic training in middle school and high school, in university, and postgraduate education, all of it has been focused on output.
Hmm.
That's a little overgeneralized, right? Occasionally, a teacher would ask to see an outline and your research notes and all this kind of stuff. But for the most part, the quality of writing, the quality of your, answers was judged on the output.
Right.
And I hate to say it, but you turn your attention to the world of STEM and architecture and all these other disciplines that are focused on building stuff,
Yeah.
there's a much stronger focus on how the process on how you built stuff.
Right.
And so a lot of our educational, you know, orientation is fearful of AI, for, LLMs and other things for very good reason, right? Because the judgment on the output is actually quite difficult. I read something yesterday, cover letters are now worthless because AI makes all the cover letters
Right.
better, right? Like a little bit of, maybe this is overly harsh, but a little bit like your calligraphy wasn't good enough and therefore you didn't get an invitation to the dinner party. It's judging not the progress on process, it's judging this thing on output. And so I think we have to radically shift how institutions think about training younger tenured people. So let me give you an example, right? If I were a university or a high school teacher today, and I have done some guest lecturing and stuff, my exams in class would be giving a question to the class on the topic that was discussed, and then giving the AI output
Yes.
against that question, and then asking the younger tenured learner, like, what do you make of this output? What's good about it? What's bad about it? What's missing? Where do you agree, disagree? Where did it, overstate its case? Where did it understate its case? To learn these critical building judgment skills
Right.
that we used to learn only by doing and then having it critiqued in an apprenticeship model, over and over again for many years until you were the one sort of doing and critiquing, and then you ultimately became the critiquing mostly and doing very little, right? And so we got to break that model, because it is how we build stuff, how we decompose problems, how we build the architecture, and particularly as we move from augmentation being sort of on the side of the desk kind of LLMs and static, containers, to a world of agentics where you're actually interfacing with a dynamic system in the workflow. I think it's incredibly important. And so this move from doing to building is a big deal. And by the way, what used to be expensive, risky, difficult is now very inexpensive, almost free, and you can iterate till you're blue in the face. And
That's
so
wonderful.
all of the barriers that got in the way of experimenting with the processes of how we did stuff have really fallen. And so we got to just move. And by the way, more junior tenure colleagues, they are quietly doing this, many of them, right? Many of them are like creating hacks on a Saturday afternoon so that they can go out and have dinner with their friends, and therefore they're doing a bunch of innovation which more senior tenured people aren't seeing, because the junior tenured person thinks that they're cheating rather than actually innovating and doing something
Pretty good.
good.
I well,
Um,
that's really funny. What I find it fascinating, I have to, and I'm just smiling like an ex-McKinsey partner criticizing Taylorism. So, right, I mean, that's an interesting thought itself, on the whole output. But I think you're so right, and a lot of lessons actually for to reflect for everyone. I think on this.
yeah.
Let me change.
And Amar, maybe the final thing on good news for junior tenure talent is we have fewer young people today than we used to.
That's true.
And so like the AI apocalypse for young people's employment, you sit there and you go, where are these young people coming from?
Right.
The demographic pyramids around the world
Yeah.
are
Correct.
narrowing into
Yes.
pipes. And
Yes.
so like uh, y- I don't see, I have a very strong tech optimism view of this. I don't see a world in which we have a catastrophic long-term and structural impact. What I am worried about is the short-term transitory impact,
Yes. Yes. No, I agree.
where the current generation of younger tenure colleagues have not been apprenticed up in their academic training to be builders. You're throwing them into a world where the performance management systems, the capability systems, everything else have not evolved and have not changed to make the expectation clear that they now need to build rather than to do. And so as a consequence, like I do worry about the 3 to 8 year kind of mini generational impact on a
Yeah.
certain set of colleagues. I think that's the real worry.
Great framing again. Shifting gears a little bit, private equity. You spent
Mm.
a time in that space. Uh, I mean, in and around, mostly around these kind of businesses that you were talking about. What is the emerging playbook for enterprise business services in private equity?
Well, I think the short answer is they don't have one yet, or
Okay.
at least there's not consensus one yet. Number one. Um, Number two, the challenge with this, as you know from the work you do with your clients every day, the challenge of this is you actually have to reinvest in capabilities. And those capabilities are more firm and concrete and set, building knowledge graphs, building data, building good data structures,
Right.
creating, not just quote playbooks sitting on PowerPoint, but actual solutions that can be deployed, whether those solutions are built within the GP itself, built within the portfolio company, or a third party partner builds it or comes in off the shelf. Regardless, like you have to invest more. And GPs don't like investing in overhead,
Right.
right?
Right. Right.
It's expensive. Like LPs are sitting there going, "What are you doing? Like you're not a holding company, you're an investment
Right.
company." Like so that's the first thing. So there are a lot of structural barriers still, and GPs probably have innovated their ways of working even less fast than a lot of the business enterprise info professional services businesses we just talked about, right? And so as a consequence, the GPs have neither the scale nor capacity nor the workflow innovation that's required to do it on themselves in the
Right.
first instance, much less to do it on the firms they own. That's number one. The second fundamental problem is there are incredibly few number of Gen AI experienced people because it's only been around 3 years.
Correct.
Some headhunter called me recently, said they're looking for somebody who's been in and around, Gen AI for the last 7 to 10 years. I'm like, the tensor was only invented in like 2017. I'm like you're asking for something that is physically impossible. But but there are very few functional capabilities that really understand this stuff. And by the way, understand the difference between when you use a deterministic model like machine learning versus a non-deterministic model like an LLM and all this kind of stuff. The other problem is that if they have industry vertical specialists, those industry vertical specialists grew up in a world that didn't have any of these capabilities available to them.
Correct.
So they don't have their own experiential playbook and track record to go like talk to folks about and talk to their executives and say, have you thought about? And what's worse, or the worst bit of this, is to be most effective, you need both the industry vertical expertise and insight on the functional capability.
Right.
And integrators that actually can integrate vertical insight, transformational insight, and will not be bamboozled by the promises and falsehoods of the technology, that you can count those on one hand in most sub verticals, right? Like whether it be executive search or legal or accounting
Yeah.
or advisory or consulting or BPO or whatever it is. And so that's really hard for PE firms to get their head around.
I mean, one of the very tactical challenges we see is, I think once you have this conversation, people agree that, okay, we need these capabilities, but it has not been kind of priced into any of the business cases right now. It's like
Right.
all the deals that has happened, like who invests and where will that money come from at the PE level or at the portfolio level? I think that's kind of always the challenge. That's the challenge. Do you see kind of almost like a AI line item from a cost perspective or from a like investment perspective getting added to these business cases as some of the newer investments?
Yeah. So I've helped a few diligences of these, you know, types of assets in the past few months.
Yeah.
You see it in two places, and I think you see it in the wrong two places.
Okay.
The first place you see it is on a downside risk on revenue,
Right.
fee, billing compression, all that kind of stuff. You see that as a downside risk. By the way, they don't really commit that there's going to be potential, revenue compression, margin
Right.
compression, but they acknowledge it in the investment committee memo as a worry, right?
Yeah.
And then the other thing they do at the same time they keep, the sort of business model static and intact is they say, well, we're now going to, and then they wave their hands vigorously around some words they put together in a sentence. And then they say, and cost will fall and therefore will profit, right?
Right.
Um, and the worry about that is the whole middle sentence where they're waving their hands vigorously doesn't really have either any or very few substantiated examples in the past, number one. And number two, doesn't take a business model view of the challenge, right? Which is this really going to become solution as a service? I mean, what things are actually going to become like payroll,
Yeah.
right? As finance and accounting ops, transactional finance, is that going to become more like a solution as a service, like a payroll? Is there other things that are going to change the business model fundamentally so that what you used to pay to do, you don't get paid to do, and it's either internalized by a platform provider for that capability, or it's internalized into the workflow and it's gone completely, right? Like these FP&A analysts in a box who are going to, get rid of all of this work that we used to do when we did snapshot,
Yes.
financial consulting kinds of things, right? And so my worry is that they've got two line items, both of which miss the bigger point, which is where is the subsector going to go? How are we going to get paid differently for it? And then what is the human based and digital based effort required to deliver the impact that is being contracted?
Right.
And that I think is a huge, huge miss.
That is a huge mess. No, absolutely. So going forward, operating partners. Right? You talked about
Yeah.
GPs. So what does the new operating partner look like, or how does the role evolve? I mean, I know it's an evolving time, but
Yeah, no, for sure. So I was up at PEI a week or two ago in New York, seeing a bunch of my friends.
yeah,
I mean, a role that used to be hard is now almost impossible, right? Um, and the reason why, if you think about where operating partners can add value, right? They can add value at the diligence level.
right,
They can add value at the value creation, planning, and execution level, and then they can add value at the sort of ecosystem curation and engagement and all that kind of stuff.
right,
And so the problem is in diligence, in many firms, it's hard for the operating partner to get a strong enough voice to say, listen, the way we used to think about the industry economics of these operating models has actually been undermined, right? Number one. Number two, on value creation, planning, and execution, um, I hate to say it this way, but in absence of a lot of definitive, evidenced 5, 10 years of experience delivering value from these new techniques, there's a lot of like, trust me, bro, going on when it comes to this stuff, right? And, private equity has historically been quite skeptical of technology based transformation driving enough value quickly within the hold period to get paid back for the investment made it and everything else. And now you're talking about moving from a world of enterprise technology stack, which is kind of knowable, to, hey, we need a new data structure. Okay, what does that mean? We don't know yet.
right,
Right?
right,
Like, and particularly when the data structure is embedding the business model assumptions about what's going to drive value in the future. And that link in B2B services is really difficult to understand, but how you construct and define your data structure can enable or not enable certain things in terms of billing and value propositions and everything else. It's things as simple as, what do you define as a customer? Is it the whole organization? Is it the private equity portfolio owner of that organization? Is it the business unit? and, right? So that's the second bit. And then the third bit that's become even harder is, who the heck do you ask for help to do this? Who do you introduce? I know that your organization and others like yours have made some great strides in building trust
Right.
within different private equity portfolio umbrellas, but who do you really trust to do this stuff?
Right.
Because the problem is that there are a lot of emerging players that have some great capabilities. You've got a lot of incumbents who are running furiously to try to make themselves relevant. And then you have a lot of commercial off the shelf solutions, SaaS based solutions, apps and modules that plug into existing enterprise tech, all this kind of stuff. And you're sort of sitting there going, do we build? Do we buy? Do we partner? Do we take it off the shelf? Do we just outsource the whole problem to a third party transformation agent? Like, and that has always been a complex set of questions. It is an even more complex set of questions now, when it is not obvious either the what you're trying to do, the how you try to do it. And so answering the who's going to help you becomes even harder. And I'm helping clients think about that right now. And that's like, it's a really angsty question. I was literally walking in the hallway of a client with a senior client yesterday, when we were like, do we need to internalize some of this capability? How much of the building capability do we need in-house versus how much do we ask the third party partner to do for us, and all that kind of stuff? And so, as someone who's acting sometimes almost as an interim operating partner himself, like, it is a really hard, it's a really hard set
Choice.
of questions to
Interesting.
address.
So Jay, yeah, you had one more lesson you wanted to share.
Yeah, well, it's more this regret that I talked about. And the regret was very early on this journey. I got super hung up on, like, particularly for side of the desk augmentation of research and writing and PowerPoint generation, all this stuff. Which tools should I use? Which models are better? I get this question all the time.
Right.
Um, and the insight I came to after a little bit was, use all of them.
Yeah.
Like, buy all of them, use all of them, like, run them in parallel, run them in sequence, take the best output, of the three, whatever it is. But, I, I told somebody recently, I have four of these LLM SOC 2 containers going. I have
Right.
three PowerPoint, SOC 2 compliant, PowerPoint generators operating. Like, I'm using all of these things often and simultaneously.
Right.
And that kind of approach to your workflow is just very, very different. And I feel really bad for people in big firms who are very limited often to, like, a single model, or no augmenting tools on production and all this kind.
R-
And I'm just like, guys, like, the amount of capability and capacity that you create by just using them all. Now, you end up spending like 650 bucks a month just on the tooling, but
Yeah.
it's a worthwhile investment versus the amount of time you save and everything else trying to do all this stuff yourself. So, one of the things I just get asked my clients to get over is, like, don't get hung up on which tool to use. You know, just pick one of them. And frankly, like, if you need to, pick them all and run them all,
Yeah.
and, like, figure out what's good and what's bad about all of them. And again, particularly for side of desk augmentation, that's going to change a bit as we get into agentics, as you know, because model response and the, like, people got really, stroppy when GTP5 came out, and, like, their finely honed preconditioning prompts and everything else started breaking and all that kind of thing. But for side of the desk kind of high cognitive complexity, white collar augmentation, just use them all. Like, make sure you've got the right security arrangement around it, and then just go for it.
Interesting. No, but Jay, I think we can continue probably for another hour here. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
the topic is just like it's fascinating, and we're both passionate about it. And I have to tell you, this has been one of the most pragmatic ways of working discussion that we have had, because you're doing it and you are changing your own ways of working and sharing in great level of detail, and obviously at a higher level insights too. it's been just fascinating listening to you and just talking with you on the topic here. But thank you so much for coming over. I'm sure we'll do it one more time, maybe after like 6 9 months when things are evolving.
Yep.
But thank you so much for taking the time out and doing this. It was a lot of fun.
Well, thank you. And I look forward to seeing how wrong I am 6 to 9 months from now. So let's cross our fingers. But thanks again. And thanks for being such a great friend and collaborator.